Great. Well, welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Werner de Wit, and I am part of the UNESCO Chair team and run the operations for the UNESCO Chair. It's so great to see you all here. Just some logistics before we get going for today. As you just heard, we will be recording this session. So if you do not wish to have your face seen, you're welcome to switch off your camera. And you're welcome to just listen in. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you're welcome to put them in chat, and the speakers will speak to them at the end, and we'll facilitate that questions there, or there'll be an opportunity for you to raise your hand and to ask your questions at the end. And also, after the speaker has spoken and we've doing questions, we'll ask everybody to switch their cameras on if you wish, for us to take a group photo. So please do stay for that. Yeah. Thanks, Darla.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Darla Deodorf. I'm the UNESCO chairholder for this chair of Intercultural Competences hosted at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. And we are so delighted that you can join us today. I would like to just say a few words about the chair. We are very committed to the overarching goal of identifying and elevating African voices on intercultural competence. And we're joined as a whole team at Stellenbosch, and many of our team members are here today, and you'll be hearing from one of our co-chairs. But I'd like to introduce the team to you. And so we have two co-chairs, Dr. Precious Simba and Dr. Divinia Jithoo, who are both here on the call, and you'll be hearing from them. And then you've heard from Werner already as our operational coordinator. And then we have Rabia Omar, Yancy Yisa, and Sarah Richmond as team leads. And then there are many others who are working with us as well. And our key priorities are looking at the intersections of intercultural competence with three of the Sustainable Development Goals, of those being gender, climate, and peace building. And so we invite you to join us in our work, and we're super excited about this webinar series as a way to hear from African voices and perspectives, and also the upcoming Intercultural Conference, which Precious will share with you more about. One of the main capacity building activities that we are engaged with is UNESCO Story Circles. We are taking those out across South Africa and the continent. It's available in their open access manual in at least 6 different languages. You'll see the link here on the screen. And we're happy to talk with you more about that at any time as well. So those are just some of the things that we're doing for you. We also want to invite you to join one of our partners, the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence, in particular, the ICC in Africa Working Group, which Divinia and Werner are 2 of the 3 co-chairs actually, and co-coordinators of that working group. But you can join with colleagues from all around the world. Quite a few of our colleagues here are part of the working group. Oh, and I also see the 3rd co-coordinator is here with us, Huba. So we hope that you'll be able to join the World Council, and in particular, this ICC in Africa Working Group. And you just go to the website that you see there, iccglobal.org. It's entirely free to join. And then you'll be sent an invite link to the online platform. And that's where you'll find that working group along with 20-some others. So again, welcome. Thanks for introducing yourselves in chat. I am seeing some of my colleagues from Argentina. I'm actually en route back from Argentina right now. And Divinia is joining us from Turkey. So we are literally all over the world, even as a team, chair team. So thanks again very much. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to one of our co-chairs, Dr. Precious Simba. Over to you, Precious.
Thanks, Darla. Thanks, everyone. Welcome, everyone. It's always exciting to see people joining from all over the world. It's very meaningful for our chair and the work that we're doing. Just briefly, just want to talk about our upcoming conference. We're very excited about that. It's going to be in Rabat in Morocco. And the call for proposals is still open, closes tomorrow. So if you haven't sent in something, we urge you to do so. And then if you already have, registration will open on Monday. So look forward to that link. You also get notification of that. But just like Dala was saying, we continue with the theme of promoting African voices in intercultural competencies. So our theme is around that, exploring intercultural competences in African contexts. So you will see quite a lot of that theme running through everything we're doing at the chair, but definitely at this conference. So we're looking forward to meeting many of you there. Yeah, I think I'll hand over back to Verna just to introduce our colleague and presenter for today.
Thank you, Precious. So, colleagues, it's my honor to today introduce our speaker, Dr. Divinia Jithoo. Dr. Divinia Jithoo is a specialist in international education at the Durban University of Technology, and she is also the co-chair of the UNESCO Chair on Intercultural Competence at Stellenbosch University. It is our honor to have her today as our speaker. She has extensive experience in higher education internationalization with a keen focus on internationalization of the curriculum. She has developed specialized expertise in international virtual engagement and specifically collaborative online international learning, or COIL as we know it, as an approach to inclusive internationalization. She holds a PhD in higher education studies from the University of the Western Cape, and her research has highlighted global structural dynamics of academic cross-border collaboration. So she's joining us today all the way from Turkey, currently there teaching. So it is really great for us to have Divinia today. And Divinia, we look forward to hearing from you. So you're welcome to share your screen and take over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. If there's some background noise, please let me know. There's some kids that have just come back from school and are playing outside my window. And I'll have to just close the windows if it gets too loud. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm truly honored to have been asked by the chair to deliver a webinar today. Thank you to all of you who have registered and joined today. I'm really looking forward to engaging with you. So I'm going to be talking to you about leadership in multinational and multicultural teams using lessons from intra-Africa collaborative academic teams. The content that I speak to you about today is largely based on my PhD studies focusing on the structural dynamics of leadership in intra-Africa higher education collaborative research teams, as well as some bibliometric studies that I conducted and co-authored with Dr. Sabo Oleta, looking at the trends and patterns of research collaboration by South African higher education institutions. So let me begin by situating our conversation within the broader mission of the UNESCO Chair on Intercultural Competence. Our chair is dedicated to fostering understanding and cooperation amongst diverse cultures, building networks of researchers and practitioners, and building higher education with UNESCO's global mandate for peace building, equity, and sustainable development. This work is grounded in the belief that intercultural competence is not an abstract ideal, but a lived practice that enables us to thrive together as local and global neighbors. So why Ubuntu and why now? Ubuntu is often summarized as I am because we are, right? To explain to those who have not been exposed to the philosophy from a traditional or cultural perspective, it's more than just a slogan. I'd like to highlight the words of one of our colleagues. She hasn't been able to join today, but Ms. Yenziwe Mbuyisa, who in our strategic sessions last year in 2024 really made me sit up and critically look at how we are engaging the philosophy of Ubuntu in higher education. as an African philosophy and way of living rather than a token concept to be leveraged or commodified in our approach to academic opportunities, whether it be for grant funding or for collaboration that would garner career enhancement opportunities for the individual. Yenziwe really made me look at the sacredness of Ubuntu and where it comes from, because Ubuntu that foregrounds our values, our principles, and our epistemological ways of knowing in Africa. And that is what should be preserved in the way that we are engaging with it, specifically in a leadership perspective. Ubuntu as a philosophy within the context of leadership is rooted in relationality, empathy, and collective well-being. In leading multinational and multicultural academic teams, Ubuntu can offer a powerful alternative to individualistic or hierarchical leadership models. It centers on the values of solidarity, compassion, dignity, and respect, values that are essential for effective collaboration across cultural, disciplinary, and institutional boundaries. So in this way, the Ubuntu framework of leadership as such and the principles of interculturalism are deeply interconnected, with each reinforcing the other's emphasis on relationality, empathy, and the creation of an inclusive, collaborative environment in our higher education system that is quite complex. Interculturalism is increasingly recognized as a transformative approach for building collaborative cultures in higher education, moving beyond the static coexistence of cultures, which we often refer to as multiculturalism, to foster dynamic, meaningful interaction and co-creation among diverse groups. So in the context of academic teams and institutions, interculturalism aligns closely with the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because you are, by emphasizing relationality, mutual respect, and the recognition that our collective success really depends on how we engage across lines of difference. So a shift in mindset, really. Multiculturalism tends to focus on the preservation and coexistence of distinct cultural identities within a shared space, often resulting in parallel lives and limited interaction. Interculturalism, by contrast, is about active engagement, dialogue, and the creation of new shared meanings and practices. It is a process-orientated approach that values hybridity, cultural translation, and the negotiation of boundaries rather than simply maintaining them. Interculturalism is about changing mindsets by creating new opportunities across cultures to support intercultural activity, and it's about thinking and acting interculturally. Higher education institutions are uniquely positioned to model and nurture interculturalism, especially as they become more globalized and diverse. The shift is not just about representation or access, but about fundamentally transforming how knowledge is led for knowledge production, recognition, and sharing. So some of the key features that authors have written about in terms of intercultural collaborative culture within a higher education sector. Dialogic engagement, interculturalism encourages ongoing dialogue, and where participants learn from and with each other, challenging assumptions and then co-creating new knowledge. Pluralism of knowledge, integrating diverse epistemologies, including indigenous, local, and marginalized perspectives that can enrich a curricula and its research, moving beyond the Western-centric paradigms and fostering innovation. Intentional collaboration, Effective intercultural collaboration requires meaningful interaction and the development of intercultural competence. And equity and inclusion, interculturalism is inseparable from equity and inclusion. It demands that all voices, especially those historically marginalized, are not only present, but influential in shaping academic and institutional priorities. So interculturalism goes hand in hand with Ubuntu. The Ubuntu philosophy resonates deeply with interculturalism in higher education. Both frameworks emphasize that our individual and collective flourishing is intertwined. Collaboration, empathy, and mutual respect are not just ideals, but practical necessities for effective learning and research. In this spirit, interculturalism becomes the grammar that connects the diverse words of our global academic community, enabling us to move from a coexistence to genuine collaboration and a shared environment. True sustainability is not just about environmental protection. When building on the deep resonance between Ubuntu and interculturalism, it fosters collaborative, inclusive academic cultures. The Ubuntu philosophy also provides a crucial foundation for advancing sustainability as a collective and equitable pursuit. So, like I said, it's not just about environmental protection or resource management. It's about creating a just, livable future for all people. Efforts to build a sustainable world are incomplete if they leave behind marginalized communities or fail to address systemic inequities. The Ubuntu principle reminds us that our well-being is inseparable from the well-being of others, meaning solutions to climate change, resource use, and social challenges must be inclusive, just, and equitable. Sustainability and diversity, equity and inclusion are deeply interconnected, especially when viewed through the lens of the Ubuntu philosophy. The African worldview emphasizes our shared humanity, mutual responsibility, and the idea that individual flourishing is only possible when the community thrives. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not optional add-ons to sustainability. They are essential pillars that ensure solutions are effective, fair, and enduring. When diverse voices and perspectives are included in decision-making, especially those from communities most impacted by environmental harm, the resulting policies are more innovative, resilient, and just. This approach reflects Ubuntu's call to celebrate differences, foster empathy, and ensure everyone's voice is valued and heard. So the Ubuntu framework aligns closely with the goals of our UNESCO chair. And as we move forward in today's webinar, I invite you to reflect on how can Ubuntu principles be integrated into the leadership of our collaborative teams, especially in an increasingly globalized society and world. What lessons can we draw from successful intra-Africa collaborations to inform global best practices? And how might Ubuntu help us reimagine intercultural competence, not just as a skill set, but as a way of being and leading together? Let's use this opportunity to reflect on ways to co-create new pathways for inclusive, compassionate, and effective leadership in our academic communities and beyond. I'm going to share a few slides as I move along. As our academic and research environments become increasingly global and diverse, the need for leadership approaches that foster inclusion, mutual support, and shared purpose has never been greater. Ubuntu leadership provides a model for building trust, nurturing relationships, and ensuring that every team member's voice is heard and valued, regardless of background or status. This is particularly relevant in Africa, where collaborative research teams often span multiple nations, languages, and cultural traditions. However, the exclusion of Ubuntu in internationalizing higher education leadership reflects systemic tensions between Eurocentric hegemony and African epistemologies, rooted in colonial legacies and neoliberal priorities. So South African universities, for example, particularly historically white institutions, prioritize collaborations with the global north. I just want to take you through some of the stats from some of the bibliometric studies that we've ran. So as you can see on this first slide, South Africa's co-authorship of academic publications between 2012 and 2021 that we ran through Scopus shows that there is a priority with countries in the global north, with the United States and the United Kingdom really taking center stage there, followed by Germany, Australia, France, Netherlands, Canada, and so on and so forth. However, you can also see that Europe, South Africa's international co-authorship of academic publications, the global north has taken up center stage, with Europe taking up 44%, and North America 15%, with Africa at only 13%. Eurocentric institutional cultures are prevalent in South African universities. For example, collaboration with the global north makes up 64% of international research collaboration, reflecting entrenched colonial hierarchies. And this marginalizes Ubuntu's emphasis on relationality and communal knowledge production. You will see also, I don't know if you're able to see all of the graphs. We've looked at collaboration within Africa and then also outside of Africa. The global north, you'll see 63%, the global south, 37%. The top 15 African collaborators makes up the same amount of the collaborations with the United States, and collaborations with Australia makes up almost the same amount of collaborations with fellow SADC countries. And there you can see, in terms of international co-authorship of academic publications, historically white institutions, I'm just not able to see all of the graphs. Right, this is just the share of publications between historically white institutions and historically Black institutions. So it also goes to speak about the capacity that's at different types of institutions within South Africa. And with that, what the stats look like in terms of the patterns and trends of where we are collaborating. As you can see, we've also looked at a breakdown of the top 20 countries per region, and the intra-Africa collaboration really is falling short. I'll go on to these slides a little later. Let me stop sharing for now. So the stats that I've just shown you has also shown that indigenous philosophies are often measured against the Western benchmarks, undermining their legitimacy. For example, African epistemology are dismissed as non-modern in research evaluation frameworks. And this is forming part of the problem that we are seeing and the lack of collaboration within our continent. Our papers have also found that neoliberal models prioritize competition, rankings, and individual output, clashing with Ubuntu's focus on shared humanity and interdependence. This creates environments where insensitive competitiveness overshadows communal learning. We've also seen resource inequalities with the second last slide that I showed you, where historically Black institutions produce only 7.4% of South Africa's collaborative research, lacking funding to operationalize Ubuntu-aligned partnerships that prioritize Africa and the Global South. There's also issues of tokenistic inclusion. While Ubuntu is rhetorically celebrated, its application is often superficial. We see on many of the South African institutions, missions and visions talk about being Africa-centered and a gateway to Africa. But when we look, for instance, inter-Africa collaboration constitutes only 13% of South Africa's international research collaboration. We've also explored hostility toward scholars from outside of South Africa, with some academics reporting exclusion and epistemic racism, contradicting Ubuntu principles of dignity and solidarity. There are also structural barriers to Ubuntu leadership. There are leadership training gaps, and I'll go a little more into that about the lack of leadership training within our higher education system. Academic leaders are often promoted based on research output, not relational skills, sidelining Ubuntu's emphasis on empathy and participatory decision-making. There can also be cultural misrepresentation. Ubuntu is sometimes misapplied as paternalistic collectivism or diluted into performative diversity initiatives, failing to address power imbalances. And then we have the policy practice disconnect. There are aspirational policies, national strategies that advocate for Ubuntu-aligned internationalization, but implementation is hindered by underfunding, Western-centric accreditation systems, and lack of incentives for South-South collaboration. There's marginalization of indigenous knowledge. Despite policy rhetoric, African epistemologies remain peripheral in curricula and research agendas. And implications for leadership: decolonizing leadership practices. Integrating Ubuntu requires dismantling hierarchical structures, fostering engagement, and centering African epistemologies in decision-making. Redefining success. Metrics for leadership and collaboration should prioritize community impact, equity, and mutual learning over citation counts and global North partnerships. So the exclusion of Ubuntu in internationalization leadership perpetuates epistemic injustice and reinforces colonial power dynamics. Addressing this requires systemic shifts to valorize African philosophies and restructure higher education around relational, equitable paradigms. These problems that I've just framed show that in African academia, South African universities can exhibit attitude towards the rest of the continent that reflect deep-seated colonial legacies and entrenched Eurocentric hierarchies. Despite policy rhetoric at a micro, being at an institutional level, a MESA at a national level, and macro being regional and global levels through institutional missions, visions, policies, and strategies supporting Pan-African collaboration, the reality is that these institutions overwhelmingly prioritize partnerships with the global north, as seen with some of the stats that I have presented. This imbalance is rooted in historical models that position South African universities as extensions of European institutions, having been built through colonial times, embedding Western knowledge systems as the standard and marginalizing African epistemologies. The pursuit of global rankings and prestige further incentivizes collaborations with Northern partners, often at the expense of meaningful engagement with our African peers. South African higher education institutions hold a distinctive and influential positionality within the African continent, shaped by their historical privilege, superior resources, and long-standing connections to global academic networks. As the most resource system on the continent, South African universities produce a significant portion of Africa's research output, as I've presented before, and attract the majority of international students studying in sub-Saharan Africa. However, this prominence is often accompanied by an enduring Eurocentric orientation with a disproportionate focus on partnerships with the global north and a tendency to frame collaborations with other African institutions as an act of capacity building rather than genuine reciprocal knowledge exchange. And this hierarchical approach frequently marginalizes the expertise, agency, and priorities of African peers, reinforcing historical imbalances rather than fostering continental solidarity. So within the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and through the lens of the Ubuntu philosophy, South African higher education institutions have a profound responsibility to critically acknowledge and address their positionality. Ubuntu calls for a relational and ethical approach to leadership that values mutual respect, solidarity, and the collective well-being of all African academic communities. This means moving beyond the paternalistic attitudes and embracing equitable collaboration, where African partners are recognized as equal contributors to knowledge creation and institutional development. It also entails prioritizing intra-African partnerships, supporting historically marginalized institutions, and advocating for African research priorities on the global stage, rather than aligning predominantly with Northern agendas. Furthermore, South African universities should model inclusive leadership by integrating Ubuntu principles into their institutional cultures, policies, and curricula. This involves validating and incorporating African epistemologies, promoting intercultural competence among academic leaders, and ensuring that institutional privilege is leveraged to uplift the rest of the continent. By embracing Ubuntu-informed leadership and DEI principles, as well as intercultural competence, South African higher education can play a transformative role in building a more unified, just, and innovative African academic landscape, one that truly embodies the spirit of Ubuntu. One of the issues that we have seen, and further compounding these issues, is leadership development programs in higher education are often sporadic, lack follow-up, and may be accessible only to a select few. Sometimes due to nomination-based participation that overlooks deserving candidates. Even when training is provided, it's frequently treated as a one-off event with little institutional support for ongoing development or practical application of new skills. There is broad consensus that higher education institutions must take greater responsibility for developing leadership competencies among academics. Effective leadership in academia requires skills beyond disciplinary expertise, including the ability to manage diverse teams, communicate vision, and navigate complex organizational dynamics. Leadership development should therefore be integrated, ongoing, and contextually relevant, focusing not just on knowledge acquisition, but also the building of self-efficacy, fostering inclusive environments, and addressing the unique social dynamics of academic settings. The absence of robust leadership training in higher education in institutions like those in South Africa undermines the effectiveness of academic leaders and the institutions that they serve. Addressing this gap is critical for fostering sustainable, adaptive, and inclusive academic environments that can meet the demand of a rapidly changing higher education landscape. I want to share some of my other stats from my thesis to show you some of the leadership trends that have taken place within intra-Africa leadership teams. So my aim of my study was to look at the nature and extent of intra-Africa collaboration, one, and also to understand what the leadership of these teams as a research leader or PI would entail. Firstly, I needed to understand the extent of intra-Africa collaborations within South African higher education institutions that are typed as research-intensive institutions. And as you can see, there's not a lot going on within the research-intensive institutions with directors of international and research offices reporting very little going on. However, there are many countries that are being engaged on the continent by South African academics who are participating in intra-Africa research collaboration. And I'd like to take you through some of the team typologies that I came across that show some of the collaborative and shared leadership that makes up part of these teams. So this was one of the more prominent team types where we have a PI collaborating with a co-PI, so shared leadership. And to address the issue of capacity within South African universities, with many of the respondents reporting that there's an aging cohort, also including young researchers, as well as master's and PhD students or postdoc students, being able to co-supervise. Be co-supervised by young researchers as well as the PI and co-PI of these teams. We also just had small teams where there's just a PI and a co-PI and there's no hierarchical structure within the team, but there's shared responsibilities and shared decision-making. This was one of the complex research teams that I came across, where the team was developed within a center of research, and each institution had an institutional nodal coordinator that was also at the level of a PI, reporting to a research center director. But also including in that the issue of capacity building so that we have more capacity at our South African research intensive universities going forward. Another interesting team type I came across is an intra-Africa team where we have PIs within the continent, but an oversight from the global north. And this is usually related to funding. Because one of the issues that we also found is that there's not a lot of funding from within the continent. Therefore, we have to rely on funding from the global north. And as much as we have the attitudinal issue towards the rest of the continent, we also have it from the global north towards the continent, undermining the the leadership capabilities of our academics and our researchers. This was also an interesting team type where we had a PI working with a governing body, bringing together networks to perform research, and these networks being brought together to form different types of teams to work on different aspects of the research. And then we had this complex one where we have a PI and co-PIs with researchers, postdocs, and PhDs, master's students, being governed by committees, local project management committees, but still structured where there's collaborative decision-making and collegiality within the team space. So transformational leadership theory has been applied to psychological fulfillment and trends to move followers through the model within the context of Africa. And it's said to result in a better standard of human capital. Authors have said that the transformational framework of leadership seeks to promote relative equality of power and status between leaders and followers. Similarly, the Ubuntu philosophy includes respect for dignity and others, group solidarity, teamwork, service to others, and interdependence. There have been authors who also explore the influence of organizational culture on leadership and argue that cultural context and human value are also important. They've highlighted that Western leadership styles or management approaches focus on an instrumental view of people as resources, as opposed to the Ubuntu perception of humans having values in their own right. The authors have also argued that leadership choice is influenced by broader societal norms and traditions. And specifically within the higher educational context, African leaders exhibit attentiveness to existing cultural values in a bid to change age-long leadership traditions, seen to be hindering effective leadership within the African context. With Ubuntu, there is seen to be a redefining exercise, establishing leadership as a moral, social, and political contract within the African context. Ubuntu is a legitimate alternative to Western leadership philosophies to diversify leadership discourse. And the Ubuntu leadership philosophy emphasizes collectivism and relationships over material objects and promotes participatory, transparent, and democratic decision-making, collective solidarity, community networks, and social sensitivity. So shared leadership can provide alternative terms such as collaborative leadership and distributive leadership, as well as collegiality with shared leadership. The characteristics include building deep relationships with all stakeholders, and it requires co-leaders to co-construct goals. Distributive leadership is a form of shared leadership that affords followers a prominent place in the discussions of leadership practice. The basic underpinnings of distributive leadership are that leadership is shared. Unlike collaborative leadership, where goals and agendas are set together, distributive leadership rather allows for shared leader activities and responsibilities without the distribution of power and decision-making. Collegial leadership, on the other hand, similar to that of collaborative leadership, also involves the building of leadership skills through interdisciplinary and capacity building that in turn empowers co-leaders to become experts within their own fields. So compatible with the shared leadership is Ubuntu. The Ubuntu leadership framework mirrors the shared leadership model of collegial leadership, in that it emphasizes collectivism and promotes transparent and democratic decision-making, the collective solidarity, and the community networks, as well as the social sensitivity. However, the Ubuntu leadership also acknowledges the cultural context and contextual knowledge values from Africa. So as you can see from the team types that I've presented to you, we have the shared leadership type that is collegial, collaborative, and where necessary, there is capacity building needs, the distributive leadership. But a key finding is that within all of these teams, there is shared decision-making by the PI and the co-PIs. And the aim is to ensure that the leadership is being built as well, and the capacity building for leadership is being built. I'm just checking on the time. I think I'm running out of time, but I'm almost finished. I won't go through all of this. Let me stop sharing. So to frame institutional structures around the Ubuntu philosophy in higher education, universities must systematically integrate its principles of relationality, solidarity, and collective well-being into leadership models, policies, and pedagogical practices. This begins by reorientating collaborative learning spaces to prioritize communal knowledge production over individual competition. For instance, adopting peer-to-peer learning strategies and digital tools to foster interdependence, where students leverage diverse strengths to achieve shared goals. Such practices can align with Ubuntu's emphasis of I am because we are, transforming classrooms into microcosms of inclusive, empathetic communities. Leadership training is equally critical. Many academic leaders, as I've said, lack the preparation in Ubuntu-aligned skills like empathy, participatory decision-making, and conflict resolution. And many of the team leaders that I spoke to actually spoke of the need for this type of leadership training. Embedding Ubuntu into the leadership training can foster that solidarity, compassion, and shared responsibility. And this should be integrated into leadership programs to mitigate the adversarial dynamics as evidenced. Mentorship frameworks grounded in mutual growth rather than hierarchical guidance further reflect the Ubuntu ethos. And we've seen that with some of the teams that I explored, where there isn't really a hierarchical structure except for when there is a need for capacity building. But even in the instance where there is capacity building through emerging researchers, young researchers, PhDs, and master's students, the PI and co-PI ensure that that leadership capacity building is also there by sharing the decision-making and also the other aspects of the research project, ensuring that the hierarchy doesn't take center stage, but that the collaborative and the collegial and shared responsibility is there, building on the young researchers. So ultimately, the Ubuntu-driven structures require systemic accountability. This includes aligning institutions' missions with social justice outcomes, such as centering humanness and interdependence. Higher education can transcend tokenism fostering leadership cultures where equity and collective flourishing define success. I hope I haven't gone too much over time. I think I did. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Divinia. I, for one, was busy just writing down as many notes as I can because this was a really worthwhile talk. And there's so much to learn and share. As you know, I work on the area of Ubuntu and research Ubuntu, particularly in education. But I like the talk that you had because one of the places that there is a great demand for expanding our understanding of Ubuntu has been within leadership. But you take it even further into leadership aligned to research collaboration. And I think your research is very timely, especially at this time where we are seeing these global lines that were traditional lines for doing research, this north-south type research is sort of falling away due to, you know, the politics around research and funding through channels like NHI, through USAID funding, for example, that is sort of forcing us to rethink those collaborations and face a very painful truth. And I think what you're offering is an alternative to think through, okay, what else, how else can we approach these? I would have loved to, I'm not sure if your study or whatever allowed you to share like real world examples to say this university, this kind of research was happening. But I'll just maybe in 1 minute, because there's a lot of questions that we have received, and I think we would want to give more attention to that. But I really took home the issue of relationality and mutual respect in building research teams, not only from the leadership character of the PI, but of the entire team structure itself and the collaboration between teams. So I took that, I think, to heart to say it's something that even as we've, from our department, and certainly for myself, as we've engaged in research collaborations, I have not thought to bring that along with me as a way to challenge the power dynamics that is sometimes very palpable in such collaborations. So really, thank you, Divinia. Thank you. I think maybe a part 2, but I will hold it there. We have quite a number of questions and comments. Maybe let's engage with that. So one of the questions was, what examples of successful inter-African collaborations can folks maybe on this call share to inspire us? That's also the same question that I had. Do you have any such examples that you can share from your experience?
Is this question to me or to others on the call?
I think it's to others on the call.
Yeah.
So we can
perhaps we can get some comments. You know, the examples of the team types that I shared earlier are examples of how we have created, you know, the collaborative, collegial, and distributive leadership within research teams. But perhaps some of our other colleagues would like to give us, you know, those real world examples, because within a research study, you're bound by ethics and you can't really talk about which university did what.
Yeah. I think I'm seeing that quite a lot of some people will be moving on to other meetings, but thank you so much for joining. Perhaps I really do think maybe a part 2 will be needed, just to get into all of that, no, genuinely to get into all of that and to share sort of possibilities, because I think that's where the answer really comes from, to say these are the the possibilities. I think, Verna, you wanted us to take a photo maybe before other colleagues have to leave, and then if their
Yes.
colleagues would want to continue with us, maybe we can do another 5 minutes and just address 1 or 2 questions before we round
Yes.
up.
No, we'll
Yeah.
definitely be able to address more questions. We can do another 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will have the recording also available if you wanted to watch the last bit of questions. And also just a reminder I've put it in chat there, next week, Wednesday, usually a week after our webinars, we get together during the ICC in Africa Working Group monthly meeting, and we invite the speaker back to come and
Yes,
also
yes.
answer some of these questions. So especially because our time ran out today, that's really a space where we have an interactive discussion. So the speaker will be there to answer some of these questions. I usually take the chat and ask some of these questions there, but we'll be able to answer some of this there that Divinia doesn't get to today, but there's also an opportunity to also have a robust discussion there. But I'm going to take a photo. So if you want to put on your camera for the photo, I'm going to take that now. Just please stay because there's 3 pages, then I'll just take the different ones. So everybody smile because you don't know on which screen you are now. So 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, so that's the first one. Don't go away. I'll tell you when I do the next one. Da-da-da. And I'm just going to the next page. Okay, and I see there's some more photos. 3, 2, 1, smile. I got you. There we go. And I think that's everybody with their cameras on for the photo. Thanks. Over to you, Precious.
Okay. Yeah. So I just kind of got overrun with, because there's quite a lot of comments that were there, but quite a lot of them are asking about those examples. And someone is asking about how we might think challenging the North-South hegemony in research collaboration. Divinia, do you want to have a take on that, and then maybe we can join in as well?
So I think the first step is to ensure that we transform our collaborative trends and patterns, just in terms of who we collaborate with and how we are valuing different knowledges, epistemology, ontological frameworks from around the world. I think our bibliometric study showed that, just in terms of the partnering, there's a lack in how we are engaging with our counterparts on the continent, and also in the rest of the global South. When it comes to a decolonial space, South Africa wasn't the only country that was colonized. So being able to engage, learn from, share knowledge, and co-create with other global South countries is also, I think, really beneficial. And I think in terms of the examples, I don't know if we can call it successful, because one of the big findings in my study is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all model of a team structure, but there's a element of creativity and innovation in building your team, looking at what the needs are and understanding how to use the strengths of your team members in a collegial way, in a collaborative way, in a way that's shared. One of the key findings also that was that each of the PIs and co-PIs also had an element of servant leadership. So that hierarchical structure was really not there in any of the teams, even in developing some of the conferences around their research. If a PI has to carry a box, a PI is going to carry a box. There's no hierarchy. Structure about who does what. If they have to collect the data, they'll collect the data and then build capacity in the young up-and-coming researchers. And I think that's where the Ubuntu philosophy really comes in, right? It's about not looking at yourself and what you can get out of it, but it's about the collective and about what others are getting from this as well. So I think it's about those values and those norms that I really saw within the teams. And when writing up this thesis, I wasn't even thinking about Ubuntu as a philosophy. I was coming across these shared practices, and in reading about Ubuntu could, connect the dots and see that, even though team leaders were not doing this as an objective, not thinking about it in a purposeful way. I think just their cultural backgrounds has enabled them to be able to work in this way and work with other people in this way. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Divinia.
Thanks. Nico.
Thank you. Sorry?
We have a hand raised, Nico. I'm able to take a question if we have time.
Okay.
Hmm.
I hadn't even seen that. Thank you.
Nico, I see he's unmuted, but I can't hear him.
Yeah, can I go ahead?
Yes.
If you can hear me. Thank you. And Dr. Dala, we've met in Stellenbosch as well. The question is just like connections, collaboration. So I just want to put it out there because I'm speaking on behalf of the marginalized youth that we are focusing on in the townships in South Africa. I've put it in the chat as well, providing them with educational opportunities, etc. So it is just to put it out there, and whoever would like to be in contact and collaborate, because research is, I've personally using my higher educational privilege background to provide opportunities. So whoever can just be in touch with what we are doing and get to know more of what we are doing. But this is the best life that I could have wished for in the context of social justice, social innovation, Ubuntu. This is the most practical way for me in living out the principles that we've heard in a wonderful presentation, which I want to thank you for. So the question is just like from grassroots level, providing access to higher education is a challenge. You've got to build bridges and so on. We are privileged to have access to about 12 global universities and giving them the opportunity to education, which broadening the mindset, etc. So I'm just putting it out there as a question. How can I market it? How can I just put it out there in a bigger way than one can imagine? So if there's any guidance, advice, this is the general question of that. You've just used the words, the real world out there, but it is a different world than the academic world. It's a different world. So how to build those bridges? I'll appreciate any comments in that regard.
Thank you, Nico. I think the first step is what you're doing right now is engaging with us and sharing, the work that you're doing. But I think also for me, just listening to you, I think, and I mean, Dala and the rest of the team can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's really an opportunity for our chair to engage with your project and look at ways in which, we can work with you and work with the youth also to understand those challenges of access and see how the work of the chair can address those challenges. I don't know if anyone else from the team to add to that.
I think that's spot on, Divinia. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more hand raised, Precious. I'm not sure if we can take it all.
I think we are just a minute under 10, so we'll take that one last hand and then we will wrap it up.
I hope that's my hand, but I'll go ahead and speak. Thank you, Divinia. Thank you, everyone. My question is, I sensed from your presentation, Divinia, a reluctance to compete using Ubuntu as a philosophy on the global stage. Did I hear that right or not? Because when I listen to Ubuntu and then I place it in whether it's the marketplace for jobs or whether it's academic circles, whether it's in development, it's in peace building, I see so many critical elements for successful, sustainable work. So I feel as though what we should do is actually push it out there, encourage the competition in the marketplace of ideas, because there is so much in terms of a superior and more well-grounded philosophy in there for development and what we might want to call success. So yeah, that's essentially my question. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is, I don't know whether you're aware, but in Zimbabwe, academics are on strike because their conditions aren't that great. So I wanted to ask your reflections on the conditions within African universities, how sometimes it's not just an outright rejection of things like Ubuntu or other things, but the management and leadership within the universities themselves leaves a lot to be desired. This might be because of the university itself, but or because of governance issues and other things beyond. So that's my 1.5 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Milton. I think to address your first question, I think what I was trying to get across is how, from our cultural background, living and working within South Africa and Africa, there's a lot to be learned from the philosophy of Ubuntu and how it's manifesting within some of our academic spaces. For example, some of the teams that I've been able to show you that, even if it's not something that the academic leaders are realizing they are doing, it's happening because of those aspects of Ubuntu that come into the team building and the team management. But I think what we're also seeing is that there's so little of that happening. And for me, if we look at the statistics of how much intra-Africa work is happening from the South African standpoint, what can we learn from these teams to be able to ramp that up? And with the philosophy of Ubuntu foregrounding that, to motivate us to do more within the continent, I think is important. And yes, as I think we also face it as some of the universities in South Africa where we don't have a lot of resources and we have more challenges than anything else just to be able to do our jobs within an institution. I pointed out earlier, the positionality of South African universities and South Africa in relation to the rest of Africa. And I think, we know the benefits of collaboration, the sharing of resources, the sharing of knowledge. So with these challenges that we have to overcome, by collaborating, we may be able to do that. But if we just leave the status quo as the stats that I've just presented, then how do we overcome collectively? So that's why I spoke about the attitudinal issue from South Africa towards the rest of the continent. And I spoke of, what is happening, but how we need more of that. I hope I've answered the question. I don't know if I did.
Yeah. I think we will hold it there. We have enough to certainly have a follow-up conversation. Certainly what Milton is raising is very, very interesting, what is happening in Zimbabwe, and we've had it other institutions as well, that some of these collaborations are really out of desperation because of the kind of conditions that other academics find themselves in. But so we have enough, I think, for a lively follow-up conversation. A link has been shared on how to join that part 2, and I'll certainly be in there so that we can continue with this conversation. Very, very interesting. Colleagues, allow us to sort of wrap it up here. We've gone a little bit over our time, and I'm so sorry about that. Such a rich content from Divinia. Thank you so much, Divinia. Hopefully we can also share, maybe time is out, the link to your study as well. That would be really great so that people can get access to that and all the data that you were sharing with us. Thank you so much, everyone from around the world. Some had to come in very early in the day, some very late. Dala is somewhere in the middle floating, but you're here. Thank you so much, everyone. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, and we look forward to equally robust conversations. Thank you so much and enjoy your day.
Thank you, everyone.